on the Lions game, because I know it wasn't the result that any of us on the Michigan side, on the Detroit side, wanted. But it was an interesting game overall. That one of the things that continues, because I think in some of our past interviews we've talked about the aggression, and I think we had an interview during that time frame where Campbell was getting criticized for, it was like when everything was rolling, and he was getting criticized for going for it on fourth down, but it was a very odd period to criticize him because he was doing unquestionably very well. The success rate was so good, but they were like, well, he's being too aggressive. And it was like, but the results are not even, they're way above any estimate that you would have for this. Now, the last couple weeks, it seemed like, and I'm not playing the result so much or saying like, hey, he shouldn't do it now, but that was an interesting juxtaposition, because if I'm thinking of a guy that is not very aggressive, one of the first guys I think of is LaFleur. And so he became very aggressive. Campbell tried to be aggressive, and which he normally is, but LaFleur got the better of that aggression here for at least this game, and that was just an interesting storyline to me.
Yeah, one team executed on fourth down and the other didn't. I think that has been the tail of the tape going back to the Philadelphia game, right? If the Lions don't go 0 for 5 on fourth down, is there a different result to that game? Very well could have been. I think today, kind of, Ryan, to your point, I think last year with the defense being in the spot that it was in, it made sense for the offense to be on the field. Be aggressive. Keep the best side of your football team out on the field as much as you possibly can. Give the other side a little bit of help with some points. I think today, obviously, when you're down 10 at that spot that he was in, really unfortunate that J-Mo doesn't catch that pass. And also, I think Goff has to deliver a better ball. I know he talked about it in the post-game press conference, and I think Brady even mentioned on the broadcast, if he just puts that ahead of Jameson Williams, it's probably going for 6. So it comes back to execution, but I do think it's fair to at least question Dan Campbell. In the Eagles game more so, because it felt like the defense was firing. It felt like the Eagles offense was struggling to gain a lot of yards. Detroit's defense played big in spots, and if you think you don't go for the fake punt at midfield in the Eagles game, well, yeah, punt it away and let your defense play. Defense wasn't playing so great today, so maybe that factored into Campbell's decision making where we're down 10. I'd like to score a touchdown now because, if we do hold them, or if we do hold Green Bay to a field goal, well, then we can go down and we can try to play for a touchdown on the win and get out of here. But, I don't want to get caught up too much in the result is how I'm going to feel about it. I want to think about the process, and I think the process still bears out for the most part. It's just a failure of execution, and that's kind of been the tail of the tape on fourth down this year for the Lions.
One thing that occurred to me, because I want to ask Shayne this, because, Campbell already wears a lot of hats in this organization. Now he's taken over the play calling, and then, you have to then worry about the end of half, end of quarter, end of game scenarios. And I'm wondering how you've seen this change of him to offensive coordinator, because I'm sure you've had different scenarios on the teams you played with, but it is taking on more responsibility. And even if you have a big staff, I don't know how you delegate those things out. It'd be hard to say, was there ever coaches that specialized in, okay, I need you to kind of key me in on when we need to take a timeout. That's a classic head coach decision. I'm sure guys like Belichick definitely did that himself, but I'm not sure how much you can delegate if you're now taking over the offensive coordinator duties, the play calling duties. It would probably be hard to delegate some of those other things to get something off of his plate.
So those things are definitely delegated, but also his decision. So it's not like there's someone that his job is to do that and he's got to tell him to do it. He knows. In fact, you see that call sheet they hold up. They usually cover their face with it when they talk into the microphone and all that. So that's going to have all of their different scenario play calling. There's all these boxes inside of that sheet. If you can ever see what's on it, it is tiny font. It's hey, on third down, against this look, these are the plays we're going to call. In this situation, these are the plays we want to call based on the tendencies and all their scouting reports of the build up to that game. In the corner is a little box that has situational scenarios on it. It has everything from, if we're down by this much with this much time left, go for 2. If we're this, that, like it has all these little scenarios on it. I'm willing to bet every team I've ever been with in college has that when I coached, and I would make those call sheets that I would hand out to certain guys that weren't necessarily on the full staff. But you need people to help co-sign, and every now and then something slips someone's mind. You're going to have a coach, whether they're up in the booth, whether they're down on the field, like, hey, coach, we should probably call a timeout right now. It's not like that timeout slipped their minds. I feel like when that happens, either it's a total breakdown and everyone forgot about it, or no one thought about it, one or the other, or it just, you know what, I'm going to go with my gut and do this instead. And you never know what it truly is. As fans, we're kind of looking at it relaxed, nothing on the line. We can make our decisions and make our observations, and we can say, oh, I would have done this. Okay, yeah, but would we have been able to make any other of these decisions that have to happen on the fly within 10 seconds or you're going to get fired type stuff? So that really plays into it. I do think that I've seen some of the best coaches over time make some horrendous time management decisions. I mean, I remember watching Mac Brown when he had been one of the greatest coaches in college. He had gone from Texas. He had went back to North Carolina, where he had coached early in his career. And I remember watching some of the worst time management decisions at the end of a game, and I'm like, how does that happen? It doesn't happen without a breakdown along the chain of command. And it's not that it was all his fault. There were other people that are there to co-sign and to remind and be in their ear that also may have failed in their job to do that as well. Or, no, in those situations, those were just blunders. But sometimes those things happen. And I think in this situation, it could have been he had a gut feeling towards something else. I don't know. But also, somebody should have been in his ear saying something if he didn't make that decision himself and he was distracted.
Well, and you brought up a good point, because we talked about this last week some, with the idea that of the play calls going into the quarterback, and you have a limited amount of time to get that in before they get cut off. It's the same thing here. Everything gets slowed down for us. We get to see the replay. We get to take our breaks and go to the bathroom and eat food during the game. They're not doing any of that. They're having to process so much information during the game, and that's a lot different scenario to then also process that.
Yeah, and let's also remember there's another guy that has what they call the book, and this is the analytics guy, and the book has all these scenarios and all these things in it, from when to go forward on fourth down, when to kick a field goal instead of go for a touchdown if you need 2 scores. All these different situations that they have. There's a guy that is flipping through this book, and there's a million tabs in it, and the book is different every week. And that person is also on the headset, and he's saying, "Hey, in this situation, we should probably do this," and then they're done. Then the decision's up to the coach after that. That guy plays into it too. I don't know how that plays into this situation per se, but there's also that guy, the analytics guy.
And I'm glad you brought that up about the analytics piece, because that's a piece that's always interested me about Dan Campbell, because I think he gets a reputation as a gut guy, and I think he is, but he also has a very good feel for the game. And Ryan, that's kind of how I saw this with the play calls. I've always been pro aggression. I think it's worked, and you can't then change. It'd be very sports radio of me to say, "Oh, well, I liked it when it worked, and then I don't like it now that it didn't work." You have to live with with the ups and downs if you're going to go with it. So it wasn't so much the aggressiveness. It just seems like they're being so conservative on some of those fourth down calls, because the Eagles game you cited, and then he did it a couple times today, right up the gut in that stiff defensive line against both the Eagles, which was an even tougher proposition, and Green Bay. It just seemed like they were a little bit more creative previously about kind of getting that, countering what you would traditionally think they might do, and having maybe not a gadget play. Sometimes it was a gadget play, but something a little bit more layered than let's run Gibbs up the middle, which is what it's been a little bit more often, it seems like, in the last few tries.
Yeah, and I will say to somebody's credit, I don't know, to maybe take the blame off of Dan Campbell's shoulders a little bit. I know that Jared Goff killed that play near midfield. And, I like running trap in passing situations, but I do not like running trap when the defense is pressuring on fourth down. So, I'm not sure what Goff saw. I'm not sure, what necessarily happened there. But, I'm with you, Ryan. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, the aggressiveness is where the game is going. It just seemed as though Dan Campbell was on he was on the cutting edge of it so early on. And, you could understand it early on in the process where you gotta just try to win football games when you're cutting your teeth. And you liked it when the offense was something that you could count on to lean on in certain situations. And it felt like you had 4 downs to play with when the running game was working so well. But I agree. I think it's to the point where maybe Dan Campbell needs to kind of reassess and think like who his football team is at this given moment. But a lot of that changes if a healthy Frank Ragnow comes back and you have an all-pro center who hopefully, fingers crossed, can fix a lot of your problems, primarily in the passing game, but in the run game, I think that would help as well.
Definitely. And they were again very injury riddled today. Cologne had his first start at center, and there are a lot of reinforcements coming. So we got to take a quick break, but I want to talk about that after the break, because it's a different scenario than last year. They might be adding up the losses a little bit sooner than they were last year, but the injury situation is a little bit flipped, where they had to deal with it earlier, but most of the people are returning here. So we'll come back with Ryan Matthews of Pride of Detroit. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Ryan Matthews of Pride of Detroit, having a good conversation about the Lions game here, and want to cover the season outlook. But I've got an important update for you. Our producer Dan did some research during the break, Ryan, and he did confirm that it was from Taxi Driver, and that is a common thing, I guess, cheddar or American cheese. And we're teaching Shayne, because this is totally new for him. He's traveled all around. He's been to Green Bay. He's been to all these places, but they probably weren't trying to serve him any cheese-laden pie.
No, never heard of it.
But it is from Taxi Driver, so good call on Dan's part there. Ryan's still not having cheese on his pie, though, so I don't think that's going to change his decision. But you brought up a good point before the break, Ryan, that I think I was really hoping that we could a victory over the Packers with that Ragnow news, because then the momentum, but they at least still have this coming. They had some returns today. They'll have others as the season goes on. So the reinforcements are coming. It'll just be, is this, what do they look like? And it's a tough schedule with a lot of teams that have a lot of wins, and it's a very competitive division. But I agree on Ragnow. I'm curious how long it's going to take them to kind of kick off the rust and get back. But he just seems like the type of guy that could also step right in and go right back after it.
Yeah, I thought as much too, right? Like Grizzly Man Outdoors, Frank Ragnow, a guy who decided he wanted to come back and play football because he loves football. I can't imagine it's going to take too long. Now, I know Schefter put out there that, probably not next week versus the Cowboys, likely eyeing a return for the Rams game. You lose this game today, though, you go to 7-5, and you take a look around. I think the Dallas Cowboys might knock off the Kansas City Chiefs here today. All of a sudden, they're a team that's playing inspired. They're coming into your town the next week. I think that's a really important game. You look at the Lions' remaining schedule, and it feels like it could come down to Week 18 versus Chicago. but Chicago's also sitting pretty right now at 8-3. They have, I think, what is an absolute gauntlet of a schedule here for their final 6 games, including that game tomorrow at Philadelphia. So when we kind of gamed out, Ryan, the remaining games in the Lions schedule before this Packers game, Jeremy and I were kind of looking at it as if the Lions can just go 4-2, if the Lions can go 4-2, they win that Week 18 game against the Bears, I think it really gives them a shot to getting into the playoffs at 11-6. 10-7 seems a little dicey. 10-7 seems a little dicey. So you'd need a lot of help. But speaking of a lot of help, Ragnow, yes, like getting him back is supreme, but maybe you're going to get Christian Mahogany back. A broken bone, and Dan Campbell talked about him pretty encouragingly when he had the injury and they put him on IR. So he'll be eligible to come off IR in Week 15. So maybe you get another starter back at some point. You got to win games though, right? And they're on the outside looking in. So those wins have to come sooner rather than later. And they need to come as soon as a week from now.
Exactly. That would be very poetic if they can have that game really mean something against Chicago at the end of the season. I think that would be an interesting end to the season. And Chicago is a little bit of they're a team that some of those wins weren't necessarily the most predictable, and there could be a bit of a return to the mean. That's not an anti-Ben Johnson thing. That's just more from a statistical standpoint. And teams do that, and some sustain it for the whole season. The Chiefs did it for pretty much the whole season last year and were a couple wins above expected, but they also had Mahomes, and that kind of creates some of that stuff. But Shayne, I'm curious, you were always a guy that had to stay ready. You might be between teams and then go try out with the team, and you weren't necessarily sure when you would get that call. Ragnow obviously is a slightly different situation where this was the deadline for him to return, and so he was probably considering that, but I figured you'd be a good one to speak to. Obviously, it's a different position, but kind of the idea that he's probably had an idea that he wants to return for at least a little bit. They did it on the last day, but that's also going to be a bit of a curve even for a veteran. He knows the scheme, but he didn't go through camp. He didn't get a chance to get those reps. So it's got to be hard. We've talked about this with with talking about how you get less time with the pads on now and you get less hits. He's had no hits. He was presumably, I imagine him like in the wilderness, and then Brad Holmes is trying to call him frequently, and he's like chopping wood somewhere, and then he kept declining Brad Holmes calls. So then Brad had like Graham Glasgow call him when he got hurt, and then that's the call that finally got picked up, and then he came out of retirement. That's just kind of in my head. But he I assume athletically and from a physical standpoint he's been working out and all that, but you still can't simulate those practice reps and those camp reps that he would have gotten.
Absolutely. I mean, you can do certain things when you're training to work on technique and basic fundamentals, and those go a long way. They do, but you sometimes really have to really feel hands on pads and pads on pads and helmet on helmet to really kind of assess instinctual type things. And when you're not in practice, it is tough to really get that down. And I think no matter how good you are, I mean, if you hold out Lawrence Taylor, he's going to come in. His athletic ability is going to make him still be kind of who he was. But also he was a guy who was a little reckless, and scheme didn't always matter. There were quite a few plays where he made a play where he went against what his assignment was and still made the play. And I think there are certain guys that, Troy Polamalu was kind of known for being a little reckless when he made some plays and not necessarily having the correct fit, but finding some sort of an intuitive, instinctual type thing. Depending on what you do, if you're not in the playbook and you're not knowing the scheme as it's evolving through the season, as it's evolving to your opponents, that can definitely be tough.
Especially with the synergy that you need as an offensive line too. He's obviously played with most of these guys, but it still will be different to get him back in there and then find that feel. So, but kind of as you alluded to, Ryan, I feel like if anybody can do this, it's him. But I'm curious about what you saw. Is that, do you like my scenario that he was just basically in the woods, and then Holmes was trying to call him, and then had to have somebody else call him? I'm curious. I'm sure you had a scenario too for him. I want to imagine what he was doing. Maybe he was lakeside painting. Maybe maybe he's doing something else.
Yeah, maybe he kind of just ran out of hobbies. Maybe it was no more. I haven't seen deer in a few days. The fish aren't biting. What's going on at Ford Field, right? He is by no means a simple man, but the immediate thought in my head was Forrest Gump. He got to the end of his run and he just said, I think I'll go home now. And, home is Ford Field for Frank Ragnow. He loves, the guy loves football. I think we need to remind ourselves that, he probably saw what this team is doing, where they're at, the spot they're in, and he couldn't wait to get back out there with his guys. He knows all those guys. He knows Decker. He knows Sewell. He knows Graham, and he knows what they're going through right now. And I could only imagine how much he was maybe chomping at the bit to come back and help the football team. And it's the single thing though, Ryan. I was shopping at Kroger, and they notoriously get awful service inside of a Kroger. I walk out, get my Thanksgiving food to my car, and I see the tweet from the Lions. I was like, wow, that's a really weird way for the Lions to announce that Frank Ragnow is going to be at the Thanksgiving Day game. And then it was playing for the Detroit Lions now. And the only thought I could have was, if the Lions needed one thing, if you could ask me, do they need another pass rusher? Sure, they could use some other things, but what do they absolutely need? They need a center, and they needed an all-pro elite level center. And hopefully they're going to get him back sooner rather than later.
I think that whole thing with the coordinators, I was getting a little sick because obviously you bounce around with the different broadcasts, and then so they all kind of share the same storyline. And at the beginning of the season, it was always, they lost both coordinators, and those were big losses. I'm not trying to underestimate those, but they kind of already covered that. I think the Ragnow thing was a little bit covered, other than in the beat markets where you guys were covering it properly and saying, hey, this is arguably the biggest loss that we've had. It's not underestimating Johnson. It's just saying that this is going to be potentially more important. So yeah, I think there is hope with what's happening, and we'll have to see how quickly he gets back in there, but hopefully sooner rather than later. I want to get you back to your gathering, but I want to hit on the Pride of Detroit Movember campaign quick before we get you back there. And I've pulled up the page here, and we'll be promoting that as we have. But I see your name on here a lot more than last year. You're sharing some of the duties with Jeremy more. You're not shaving your head. You didn't volunteer for that one. But are we at the Dan Campbell caffeine challenge? Because Shayne has a similar caffeine regimen with his coffee. And so I'm curious if we've gotten to that amount. That was $35,000 raised, or if we have to wait to that to get to the big event here, and how you're feeling about doing that.
We're still waiting it out, but I got to ask you, Shayne, is that something you had to build up a tolerance? Can I not go 0 to 100 like that?
I don't think it's safe for the average person. I don't know if when the radioactive spider bit me, when this took a hold, but I started drinking coffee like everybody else. You saw people put cream and sugar in it, and then I cut that out, and then it was like, I need a little more juice. And then I started throwing shots of espresso in it. And then I think one time I actually went to a Starbucks, which I abhor. I do not like going to coffee shops. I like to make my own coffee. And I said, can you give me a large black coffee with one less than the lethal dose of espresso? And I think they gave me 10 shots of espresso in this big coffee. And I was coaching, so I kind of needed that juice, and it got me through. I didn't get jittery. I know some people that if they have 2 regular coffees get jittery. So I don't know if my ADHD gives me like an adverse effect to caffeine or what. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so I think with me, I'm a regular coffee drinker. I drink a black. Usually I do 2 cups a day, but we'll see. It's for charity, Ryan. So you really got to pull out all the stops. I think I'm on there I have to start a Jared Goff chant in a grocery store. We had the other thing where the players doing things on the field earn us punishments every time Jared Goff throws a touchdown pass, like he did to Slaw today and JMO. I have to eat 10 more chicken nuggets. So I think I'm up to like 100 nuggets this month. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's awesome. It's for a great cause. I know we're going to be getting into the end of November here, but we're actually going to run things through the end of next week. So December 6th, that Saturday is going to be our 24-hour live stream where we're on from morning to night. And it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great way to finish things out. And hopefully at that point, we're talking about the Lions with 8 victories.
Definitely, and we'll be promoting that, and definitely tune into that. They get a lot of great guests for that. I'm doing a little research here for you, Ryan. Shayne brought up the 10 shots. I'm seeing that that you basically have, so a black eye is 2 shots. A green eye or a dead eye is 3 shots. I don't know what 10 is, Shayne. I don't know what we can call that.
Do not resuscitate.
yeah, DNR. That's a DNR coffee right there. Yeah. So I'm glad you're doing though. So do you drink any coffee, Ryan? Is this truly 0 to 100 here?
Oh, no. I usually do a couple cups of black coffee throughout the day. I mean, I need it when I get up in the morning to teach. So I need it. Vital.
Okay, yeah. If you were going 0 to this, I'd be a little scared. I think the Jared Goff chant in like a grocery store or whatever. That just seems like something you would do anyways. Maybe like I can see you doing that.
Nah, maybe not Jared Goff, not after the past month. But yeah.
Well, yeah. Maybe a more random player for that one. Maybe a Khalif Raymond chant or something. But no, we want to make sure to highlight this. We'll be talking about the live stream that you guys will do and all of that, because we want to support the Movember campaign that you guys are doing, because it's a great cause, and we'll be promoting it on our social media and everything. But we appreciate you joining the show. We want to make sure you get that dinner that you laid out there, and yeah, we appreciate you joining us. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, and we'll hopefully talk to you down the road as the Lions chalk up some more wins here.
Yeah, and we not to put you on the spot, but maybe we need to have Ryan Walsh as a special guest on the little live stream on Saturday, December 6th, if that works for your schedule. So happy Thanksgiving to you two fellas, and hope you guys have a great weekend.
I'd hate to have the campaign money go down. There's a scene in Parks and Rec where the money actually goes down when they're running one of these 24-hour campaigns. So I'd worry about that if I was on there. But I'll do anything I can to help. So you can pencil me in if you need to.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, appreciate you joining the show, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. And go enjoy your meal here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. See you guys.
All right.